We are doing a little bit of change. We're done with the operating advice for now, but we have a really fun format coming up now. We call this a fishbowl format. So it's going to be very interactive with the audience. So please be attentive. Be ready to maybe contribute to the conversation. So we're going to be talking about emerging use cases and possibilities. Moderating the panel will be Dani from MetaWeb Ventures. And as always, fun fact about Dani, she actually knows 5 languages, a lot more than me. Please welcome Dani.
Thank you, Will. Awesome. I want to bring onto the stage today three amazing panelists. So we have Momo from NearTasks, Zoe from Glass, and Anjali from Collab.Land. Come on, join us on the stage. Super. So Momo, Zoe, Angie. Great. Okay, so as Will mentioned, today will be a little bit interesting because we're trying something called a fishbowl session, which means this is your fishbowl, we are your fishbowl, and it is interactive and open. So I'm going to start with some questions for our panelists here, but if you in the audience feel that you have a question or you can contribute to this discussion, please come up to the front and I will hand you a microphone to participate in the conversation, and then you will rotate out and another community member can step in and be part of this conversation. And you can ask these wonderful panelist questions, or you can respond to one of my questions. And we really want to be very open and inviting because this is a founders-focused session, and we just want to have a bit of fun here. So, yeah. Welcome to the adventure. All right, so we want to get started by maybe having each one of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the project that you're working on. Maybe Momo, you can kick us off.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody. It's great to be back here at NEARCON, beautiful Lisbon. So my name is Momo Araki. I'm a software engineer. I work at a company called NearTasks. It's basically a continuation of the work that the founders of Near Protocol itself were working on, which is creating technologies that converge between AI and blockchain. So in this case, what NearTasks does is connects AI companies who want to train their models with data and create markets for labeling and producing that data with people all around the world. So it's a gig economy model.
Awesome. Zoe.
Great. Hi, everyone. Excited for the interactive nature of this session. I'm the founder and CEO of Glass, which is a Web3 loyalty and engagement platform for the $1.6 trillion alcohol industry. So the alcohol industry faces 2 major problems, one of which is the fragmentation of sales channels across bars, restaurants, liquor stores, sports stadiums, music festivals. Glass gives these brands the tools to build on-chain direct one-to-one digital relationships with consumers so that consumers can earn and redeem rewards across these channels for enjoying drinks and driving healthy in-person social occasions with their friends. The alcohol industry also faces a very complex regulatory environment in terms of age restrictions, restrictions that vary by country and region around the types of loyalty rewards and marketing that brands are able to offer. So by bringing this activity on-chain, we're also able to create a clear, transparent record of safety and compliance that makes brands and regulators more comfortable and more enthusiastic about driving this value to consumers for the first time.
That was awesome. Hi, I'm Anjali Young. I am the co-founder and the chief community officer for Collab.Land. Collab.Land is a tokenized community management system. We started about 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, with just a single DAO, and now support over 53,000 communities over Telegram and Discord, NFT communities, DeFi communities, investment groups, gaming, major brands, anyone who wants to create a community in crypto or with tokens, use Collab.Land.
Wonderful. So kind of to get started here, when a lot of us started, the premise of Web3 was to build a brand new web, to change the world, to build something better than what was currently in place. And we've spent a lot of time building infrastructure, which is great. And today we're here to talk about, well, what comes after infrastructure? So what are those use cases? Zoe, maybe you can kick us off a little bit of talking about what you imagine people could do and founders could work on that goes beyond building infrastructure.
Great question. Completely agree. I think we've seen a lot of time recreating existing systems in Web3 for the sake of Web3 without solving true underlying consumer needs. So in terms of topics to focus on for emerging founders, I think, of course, starting always with the consumer problem rather than the solution, focusing on problems where the underlying Web3 technology can truly solve the problem in a new way that wasn't possible in Web 2. And then within that, I think looking at industries that are that are fragmented, that are undigitized today in Web 2. Alcohol certainly being one of them. Before launching Glass, I spent a number of years at AB InBev, the world's largest beer company, where I saw firsthand just how little consumer connection even massive brands like Budweiser, Stella Artois really had. But beyond, of course, food and beverage, there are a lot of other industries that are today in Web 2 separated from the consumer. This includes sports. We've seen a lot of exciting activity there. Sports teams are historically dependent on the broadcasters and the networks to reach their fans. Tokens can power that direct connection. Things like the music industry, where artists often don't know who their end listeners are. We've also seen a lot of exciting emerging use cases there. Restaurants, Blackbird is an exciting project that we're tracking at Glass.
That's really cool. A lot of loyalty programs, a lot of consumer focused sort of platforms. Momo, I think you've explored quite a few use cases within that space. What are some of the ideas, the dreams, the possibilities that people could sort of lean into?
Yeah, sure. So I've been around as long as you have. We've seen a lot of different kinds of use cases, royalties platforms for creative output like music. We saw prediction markets. We saw supply chain products and everything in between. I've worked personally on Ethereum analytics products. I've worked on infrastructure at Avalanche, and at Near I've been working on an NFT platform for creators, and now I'm working on this AI marketplace in the gig economy sense. But the most recent use case that I thought was very poignant, if incredibly humble and primitive, is that I had a software engineer friend who was laid off recently, and just to help him out, I sent him some crypto. And so, I think to myself, that was incredibly easy. You take it for granted, this primitive of just transferring value, but if you take that idea and you are someone who has migrated to another country and then you want to send some money back home to your family, this is a remittance, and crypto is just incredible for that basic idea. So beyond all the applications and all the programmatic things that you layer on top of that, I think, I just had a realization, it's pretty incredible that you can just do that so simply. So in spite of all of the UX hurdles that I think we've all experienced along the way, they're just little moments where you realize it's kind of happening, it works.
Yeah, you're touching on a really good point, which is sort of the globalization of probably capital and information that is being triggered by this movement. Historically, there definitely has been a barrier between countries, right? Where you have to go through a forex to make sure that things move in and out. And now we have this concept of a universal currency, right? That could move across borders. How do you think that that's going to play out in terms of things people can build on top of that? So if that's the primitive, what comes on top of it?
Yeah. So the currency has
like a Venmo that could work for everyone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I can't use Venmo with my friends who are in Paris, right?
Right,
What's
exactly.
That?
I think it's just going to enable new connections, new webs of relationships. you meet somebody, you know, the crypto has the property that it's pseudonymous. Your counterparties are people that you don't even know. So what you're basically doing is creating new connections between people you have never ever met before. And I think that kind of territorial sovereignty border starts to dissipate a little bit. It becomes a little bit more dispersed, a little bit more intangible, more invisible, because these technologies are trustless. So before, you used to have these more face-to-face relationships, and you still need that. Like with Venmo, when you send money to someone, you want to confirm if they actually are who they are. So you get a list of identities, who is the right Dani Osorio, enter her mobile phone number to confirm. You still have to do those checks. So it's this balance that you have to play with all of the anonymity and the kind of identity labyrinth endemic to this technology with a verification. So trust is still required, but this just kind of opens the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, that's really cool. And Angie, I know that, I think to this day, Collab.Land is probably still the platform I think has the most users I've ever heard of in Web3. I think you talked about millions of users.
We have, last time I checked, it was 2.9 million unique users.
That's incredible. And so from that, what are you seeing as sort of the emerging kind of use cases or the large communities that are really popping up? What's really, what's happening? What's cool?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we've been thinking a lot this year about what do our members want compared to what do the admins and the communities want. We call our service an 8-course meal, the way it is right now for our communities as a whole, for our administrators. And we've built a mini app marketplace for communities. So there's all types of apps that you can one-click install into Collab.Land. So we've taken good care of the admins, and that train is already going, where new developers out there can build little mini apps for Collab.Land communities. But what can we do for members? And we've been really focusing on really just this question of emerging use cases, and kind of touching on what Momo had said as well, which is what people want is to be able to transact simply with each other, sometimes in a community context, sometimes not in a community context, but being able to tip each other, being able to trade together, being able to buy and sell from each other. Being able to exchange value is key right now.
The tipping one is interesting because we saw Reddit tried to do it, and obviously Patreon has a version of this. How are you seeing this concept of fans or community members supporting their community? How is that playing out?
Yeah, so we've had a pilot program for tipping for over 2 years now. And so we have about 75 communities that we've been watching using a specialized private beta alpha Collab.Land tipping. And those are the communities that are the most engaged. When members, admins get to say, hey, thanks for that tweet that you sent and it brought in a couple more members, or thanks for helping someone else onboard into the group when there were no mods in the group at that time. So it's that type of goodwill sharing and combining that with reputation sharing. Anything that can be trackable on chain is of tremendous value right now.
I like the idea of tipping as a curation sort of indicator, because if you look at something crypto Twitter, right? It's so much clutter, and things surface because of whatever algorithm is in place. But I think having to put money behind something is the ultimate curation, right? You're do I like this enough to spend $1 on it?
Yes.
It's the answer is probably no for most things. And then for the things that you do, you're actually, I want to give a little hat tip to this and say good post or good story, or I'm with you. And I think that what you mentioned about actually transferring value,
or subscriptions even, you see Instagram using subscriptions really well. I'm definitely a fan of them, and there are plenty of creators, especially ones that are recycling and reusing old clothing and turning them into something new. I subscribe to all of them. I don't have time to watch them all, but I'm happy they exist. And so in the same way, it's if you're seeing someone do something that you believe in and want to encourage, that's a great way to do it.
Right. Okay. That's really cool. So, Zoe, can you tell us a little bit about some of the use cases you're seeing in the loyalty space? You talked a little bit about Blackbird, obviously, and even beyond those use cases. Like, what do you think people should be building that would be really cool?
Yeah, I think, and so we're seeing, of course, a lot of Web3 activity in the loyalty space. Some of that does relate to tipping, giving people more personalized ways to support the projects and individual creators and even brands that they feel more emotionally connected to. I think one of the most exciting potential use cases, or I'd love to see more activity, is that focus on driving social experiences, both virtually and in person, through these Web3 communities. One of the ways, and actually I'd be interested to hear folks' thoughts on social DAOs, which were big. One of the areas I was initially most excited about in the world of Web3, giving folks an ownership stake in their communities, incentivizing them to build together. We've seen those start to...
Yeah, no, I think this is a good question. Does anyone know anything about social DAOs or social apps? Anyone want to come up here? No? Come on, June, let's go. Yes. All right, Zoe's question. Social DAOs, social apps.
All right, I was an early FWB member, so maybe I can contribute.
Perfect.
What's the question?
Oh, just curious for your thoughts on, I think there was a lot of excitement 1 to 2 years ago. We've seen this, I'd say, fade a little bit in terms of being first and foremost in folks' consciousness. So what do you think these social DAOs can do better? Do you see more future opportunities for growth?
Yeah, I sort of got into that whole thing, and I think, Anjali, you'll have a lot of insights based on Collab.Land data on a lot of this. But I got into the whole thing through what we were calling at the time personal tokens. So like anyone can roll your own token and issue a token. So like I issued a token. If you go on Uniswap today, you can still buy June tokens. There's very little liquidity. Hit me up for an OTC deal. So there was that idea. And then it was like, oh, well, instead of individuals issuing tokens, groups can issue tokens. And so then you ended up with things like FWB. But then I think that kind of petered out because I think the token incentives were not well aligned. There was a lot of issues, like another subset of this is like fan tokens, right? So like you're an artist, you have tokens, you issue them, but then to get any exit liquidity, you're dumping on your fans, right? So there's an issue there. But then I think recently I was playing with FriendTech, and I think that solved a few of the issues. Like one of them is like, initially as a creator with tokens, it's very hard to distribute them and get them into the hands of fans. Like you have to somehow send them around. And then two, once they're in the hands of the fans, there's very little reason for them to pay them back to you, right? So the utility problem. So I think FriendTech solved two of those things because the moment you go in, first it's denominated in ETH. Of course, there's your keys, but they don't, they're not ERC20s. And then secondly, there's straight away some utility, right? There's a reason to give it back, which is to buy the keys to join that chat room. So I think things like that show that there's some progression in the social token use case. But I would love to hear.
I'm
from you.
already
actually.
mic'd.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is an incredible use case, especially because of royalties. And we talked a little bit about royalties. But royalties are really foundational to how the NFT boom came about and how we attract creators into this space. And so with the FriendTech situation and really with FriendTech clones all over, FriendTech is not only just a standalone app now, it's become its own movement. In the same way that you would start an NFT community, you wouldn't think, oh, that's a copy of Bored Ape. No, it's its own standalone movement. And in the same way, we're going to start seeing more of these SocialFi apps take off as well, which I'm so excited about. Because removal of royalties from a third party like OpenSea or Magic Eden or Blur or whatever, like that's just been such a huge detriment. We definitely need a native token where we can have our royalties built in from scratch and that nobody can take away. So I'm very excited.
100%. And I think that was one of the more interesting things for me with how NEAR was built, is because I think that royalties are built in at the protocol level, but I'm not an engineer, so maybe Momo can talk about that.
Royalties built into the protocol level? Yeah, well, you can implement royalties at any point, you can, if you wanted to, implement royalties at the protocol level, where for every action where you transfer value, you can just divert some money to another address, in some proportion. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's just an option that you would add to your code, and you can do that at any point. You can do it within your application. If you believe it's important to do it at the protocol, you do that. I mean, like staking in a way, is like, it's kind of like the same pattern,
Yeah.
So you have a pool of money, some of it goes here, most of it goes there.
Of course, but like, how would an artist, like, if you are putting forth an NFT collection, right, and you want to defend against the fact that maybe like, an NFT marketplace might decide in 6 months that you were very successful and they're not going to pay you anymore. How would you implement that from the beginning to say blockchain has this potential for being, immutable, and we're setting the rules in the smart contract from the start, and like, this is my deal. Like, I am going to have this amount of royalties, and I don't want anyone to change my artist, stipulation. How does that work?
It's about the asset itself. So if you're a marketplace and assets come in and they're being provisioned or created by some other entity, you don't necessarily have authorship over this thing. So if you program the asset to become smart, as it were, and to say for each time you transfer this asset, you must do that proportional like transfer of value. That's how you enforce it. So it's about kind of empowering or like authoring or creating strong permissions around the object itself, not the platform through which it transfers. If that makes sense.
Is anyone in the audience like an NFT creator or working in that space? Like, have you experienced? All right, let's go. Eric to the stage. Please, quick introduction and tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Sure. Hey, I'm Eric Weiner. I'm the CTO of Pagoda, but I was previously at Nifty Gateway, which is an NFT marketplace.
Nice.
Worked with Collab.Land on that stuff. So one of the issues here is that if you have, there's a financial incentive to avoid royalties, to avoid being a part of the community. If you have a gift feature on your asset, then people can abuse that gift feature to sort of make an OTC trade, go around a marketplace, or even build a marketplace that uses that feature at the contract level to systematically avoid royalties. And so there's no...
It's like the PayPal friends and family option.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think the pushing the fact that it's really hard to take it off the honor system and keep it really prevent somebody from working around the system. But if you make it either an aspect of social shame, where people are going to not use your platform or not use your not use your token if you're working around that, or even the legal process, that's how royalties work in the fiat world.
Well, what about buying and selling into the bonding curve, like with Friendtech, right? Like, let's not sell to each other. What if we're all selling into something else? That's a way to enforce royalties.
Yeah, it sort of aligns the incentives so that there's not this constant, when you've got these businesses competing, they're going to try to get every
Race to zero.
They can, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
Did you feel like, as a marketplace, did you feel pressure to race to the bottom because places like Blur were removing royalties and thus nobody could stand for creator royalties, or how did that play out?
Absolutely. And so what we did at Nifty Gateway is we tried to take a hard stance that we were going to continue to support creator royalties on the secondary market, and sort of put that stake in the ground to, which was, it helped because it brought artists to us. It brought people who cared about this to us.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of separating. It was a method of that social shaming, saying, look, if you care about this industry, if you care about this art, if you care about this work, if you care about these artists, come here. If you're trying to make a quick buck, go there. You'll run off to AI when the crypto boom busts.
Eric, I think about tipping in the U.S. I know in Europe we don't do it, but if you can't afford to tip 20%, you don't go out to dinner.
That's exactly right.
It's social shame right there. It's built in,
Right.
but it's definitely not true globally. So then you end up with cultural differences as well. Yeah.
But if people care about the product, they'll do the thing.
I'm with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, Momo, please.
Yeah, so I have, because Zoe works in alcohol industry, I was curious about this, and on the topic of tipping, again, this is perhaps a US cultural thing, but so in restaurants, wine and alcohol and spirits have the highest markup. That's the margin primarily for the restaurant. How much should one opt to tip on, something like wine? I'm not sure. I mean, I tip, 20%, not to like virtue signal or anything like that, but I can also understand if most of your bill is like a very expensive bottle of wine. It's like, again, not me, but it's like a Domaine de Romani Conti. It's like a $20,000 bottle of wine. Again, I don't know, never sat at that kind of dinner table, but what do you do in that case? And also wine is super interesting because it has these components, not only that it's the margin for the very end of the supply chain, the restaurant, which makes it all happen there, but in the beginning, there's also the winemaker, and then there's all these people in between, the distributors, the geologists who are doing all these things. There's like supply chain aspects of it, which is like, where are the grapes grown? What is the terroir, so to speak? You can use blockchain to, like I see all of these adjacencies in something like wine because it has these supply chain mechanics. It has this idea of provenance. You can also use it as a financial investment, but you have to ensure the quality of the wine is maintained under proper temperatures, blah, 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 over time, so it retains its value. So I'm just kind of curious, where all these things intersect.
Yeah, well, there's a lot there in that question. In terms of tipping, as an early stage founder, certainly not buying those $20,000 bottles, but when you tip, that does go directly to the server and the wait staff. That's not money that flows back to the wine producer. That's to, this is not Web3 related at all, but there's a lower minimum wage for servers in the US, which is, I think, terrible, and they rely on those tips for their income. So I think it's very important to tip and to tip well. In terms of the flow of value, what Glass is really focused specifically on is the massive waste in advertising spend that these alcohol brands spend. Alcohol brands spend $8 billion per year on advertising. That's almost entirely top down. And for that same amount of money, one of my kind of aha moments when I was at AB InBev was seeing that for the $10 million that a brand will drop for a 30-second Super Bowl ad, they could instead support 500,000 people actually hosting Super Bowl watch parties, bringing their friends together in their homes, creating these amazing in-person social occasions that are really what drinks are all about, and really getting to that, I think, to get back to first principles and kind of how Web3 is solving underlying problems, we're in the midst of a global loneliness crisis. That's a worldwide issue. I think this is how I got interested in social DAOs and kind of structuring these communities. But to see brands that are dependent on people getting together to socialize in person, spending money on ads instead of money on supporting those occasions was a major problem that I see Web3 can fix in the alcohol space, but also across other social platforms.
That's really cool. I hear all of you talking about sort of Web3 empowering communities, and that maybe being sort of the breakthrough of going from the individual to the collective. How do some of these watch parties happen? This is kind of cool. Are you saying that brands like AB InBev will pay me to host a party for my friends?
Yeah, exactly. That's the vision. It's
a cool use case, just FYI.
Yes, for that $10 million, send you a gift card that you can use to buy drinks, buy snacks, buy maybe some games to play with your friends, things that really strengthen your in-person social relationships, give you that push to, when there's Netflix and there's Tinder and there's all these, drains on our attention that do make it harder for us to get out there and socialize in person. These brands these industries that existentially depend on that socializing can, I think, do a lot more to directly support that.
That's really awesome. And speaking of communities, Angie, which communities have you seen sort of grow the largest or have the most activity in sort of that Collab.Land sphere?
Oh boy, that's a good one. I mean, every single week we're watching, before I wanted to say something about Momo's topic, sorry. I was just thinking blockchain fixes that, doesn't it? You pay in crypto and then the smart contract distributes the money to the winemaker and to the delivery person and to the label maker and all across the supply chain. Why don't we have that already?
Yeah, it's baked into the price of the bottle, on the wine list, right? But you know, the things that come on top, like the tipping,
The tip.
like maybe, like, I don't know, like, should that go all
Yes,
to the
it
restaurant? I don't know. I mean, or should
Maybe
it
you
kind
want
of
to tip the
disperse
winer,
more?
the
you know?
winemaker.
Yeah, I want that. I want it to go back all the way to the people that are squashing the grapes.
Yeah, because it's all
And
people
picking
working
them.
together, right? And you have this like one commodity, but to get from commodity to like the point of service, you
Yeah.
know, there's all these intermediaries, and yeah, it's just like right now it's not captured, like the
Well, an opportunity,
The
right?
supply chain aspect of
Supply chain, but also the opportunity of who gets to be a server in a nicer restaurant that serves $20,000
Yeah.
bottles of wine.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a genetic lottery
Yeah.
that's involved there, and where you live and what you look like and all of that. And so, or maybe how you were educated. And it's just like, if we're trying to level the playing field here, and if we're trying to give more opportunity to people at every level, every social class across the world, with any level of education, despite where you were born and who you were born to, like, wouldn't